Good evening and welcome to this regular meeting of the Helotes City Council. It's September 11th, 2014, and we're underway at 7 p.m. Before we get into the agenda, I'd just like to let everybody know that Council Member Bert Bives has a birthday today. He's turning the big 60. You didn't mind if I told him that, did you?
Not at all.
Okay. So we congratulate Bert on his birthday and glad he made it.
I cut my walker out back.
Okay, before we carry on, I would like to ask if you have a cell phone or other electronic communication device, if you would please turn it to off, silent, or vibrate. We would certainly appreciate it. And also during the meeting, if you have a need to text or talk to another person, please take it into the hallway so that it doesn't disturb the meeting, and we certainly appreciate your cooperation. First up, we have our invocation. Tonight that'll be given by Council Member Alex Blue, and that'll be followed by the pledge to the American and Texas flags. So if you would please stand for the invocation and pledges.
Heavenly Father, as we gather here this evening, we are thankful for your presence as we contemplate issues that will shape the future of our community. Give us guidance as we work through next year's budget. We ask that you protect our police, firefighters, and all of our public servants as they work daily to make our community a better place for all of us. On this day of remembrance, we ask for peace for the families of the 9/11 tragedy. We also ask for desperately needed rain. And finally, we ask that you provide guidance to our elected officials at all levels, that they keep the citizens first in every decision they make. This we ask in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag.
I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God,
One and indivisible.
Okay, we have 4 public hearings tonight. First public hearing is to give all interest, and we'll start this public hearing at 7:03. This is to give all interested persons the right to appear and be heard on a resolution by the City Council of the City of Helotes, Texas, approving appropriations for the City of Helotes Economic Development Corporation's fiscal year ending 2015, operating and capital budgets beginning October 1, 2014 and ending September 13, 2015, to support the EDC's programs, projects as defined by Article 5190.6 of the Development Corporation Act of 1979, Sections 2 and 4B of Vernon's Texas Civil Statutes and Cooperatives. We had no one sign up to speak at this hearing, so I'm sorry. That is, I was thinking that was the first public hearing. You signed up for the second one, so I got you. The agenda item number 2. I was momentarily confused. Gary, you were the first one to turn in a paper. So if you would, and give us your name and address, and Grace will time you at 3 minutes, so please keep your remarks to 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I'm Gary Gillespie, and I live at 10100 Rafter S Trail. This is in reference to me looking several weeks ago at the sign under the glass and looking at the EDC proposed budget. I am against using public money, whether from the city or the EDC, to improve private property. Let the owner pay. If this property is so important to the city, then I would suggest EDC and or the city give a 10-year tax abatement with a clause that the city is to be repaid if the business leaves before the 10 years is up. EDC gave $10,000 to Cha-Cha's, and they closed their doors soon after. What did the taxpayers get for that investment? It was such a waste of our tax money. In addition, this property is over the aquifer and needs to be developed sensibly and carefully. using good common sense. This private land owner can use his own money to improve his land and not use ours. No business is that important. I'm unwilling to subsidize any private business using city or EDC money. Let the owner pay.
Thank you. Next up, Ron Green.
My name is Ron Green, 14255 Antonio Drive. This is a public hearing, so we can discuss.
Yes.
Correct?
If there are we won't get into a discussion, but if you
But
make an
there's
inaccurate
questions.
statement, we can correct it, and the council members can ask you questions.
But we can ask you questions.
No, sir. You can speak to the issue, but we're
Okay.
not gonna get into a
Okay.
discussion.
My concern is that in the EDC budget, that there's money set aside for incidental take permit for private land owned by a private individual. And it's very unclear whether that money is in the budget or not. Is there some way that I can find out about that?
You can call the EDC's economic, or the specialist, or you can come to their meeting next Wednesday.
Okay, because at the last meeting, my understanding was that that budget item was put in, it was taken out, there was some discussion in the public, in the purview of the public, but it was never
The
decided.
EDC will be having a meeting next Wednesday, and you're welcome to come to that. It's an
Okay.
open meeting, so you
But-
can ask all your
Okay,
questions
but
there.
would that be voted on, well, would that be considered today, or is this simply a public hearing on that?
This is just a public hearing.
And at that hearing, what kind of, is that a hearing for the EDC?
You would have to check their agenda. I'm not sure. I haven't really seen it.
That's a public hearing. And at what point and what venue can we discuss with you these things so we can find out? Because I went through the 200 and some pages of the budget, and I didn't find anything that would suggest that there's money set aside. This is a city budget, and I know we're on the EDC, but it's very difficult for a person, a taxpayer, to follow this. How do we find out if you won't have this discourse with us?
I'm here every day. City administrator's here. You're welcome to call, sit down. We'll discuss anything you want. But this is not the venue for us to get
Okay.
into discussing. You either make your statement at the public
Okay.
hearing, which you have 3 minutes to do that.
Yes.
And then the city council members can ask you questions if they don't understand what you're talking about.
Okay, I just want to be on the record that I oppose the use of this money for incidental take permit. That is land that's protected by in the Federal Register. It's a critical habitat unit. It is in the property that's under discussion, as I understand it, is within that property limit. And I don't believe that it's in the best interest of taxpayers to have private money go to that, particularly when the private owner, from my understanding, and since this is not being discussed, is not willing to put forth his own money for this. And that's all I have on that.
Okay, thank you very
Mayor,
much.
can I say something?
Yes, he's got a question.
Mr. Grant, I just want to tell you the meeting's at 1
At 1 o'clock?
Yes, sir.
Next
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And their agenda is online, and it should have a book out front. Okay. Next up, we have, is it Doug? Doug Young?
Yes, thank you. I'm Doug Young, and the address is 9410 Camino Venado here in Helotes. And I would just like to state on the record that I also am opposed to using public money for private development of land in general, and specifically at the corner of Highway 16 and Scenic Loop Road. Thank you.
Just for clarity, at this point, and I don't recall ever announcing it or seeing it anywhere, there is no intention of paying for any studies on, I'm assuming we're talking the Scenic Loop, Bandera Road property. There's never been any intention of subsidizing any part of the cost for any engineering or anything else on that land. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close this public hearing at 7:10, which brings us to public hearing as agenda item number 3. And this public hearing is to give all interested persons the right to appear and be heard on proposed City of Helotes, Texas FYE 2015 budgets, including but not limited to the general fund, debt service fund, capital replacement fund, dispatch and emergency medical service, EMS proprietary funds, household hazardous waste fund, municipal court building security and technology funds, police department explorer post, federal and state forfeiture and training and education funds, the PEG public access fund, that's our public access channel on Time Warner, and school safety fund budgets. And this public hearing will open at 7:11. And we have, again, Gary Gillespie. You may just, again, please tell us who you are, your address, and you have 3
Gary
minutes.
Gillespie, 10100 Rafter S Trail, Helotes. I want to ask Mr. Mayor, why do we need a tax increase? When I was on council, we just went line item by line item, and we would make adjustments that way. Over the summer, we've spent 4, 5, 6 meetings that were several hours each working on the budget.
So this is actually the 4th public hearing, or the 3rd public hearing, item number 4, addressing the tax rate. On my presentation to the council, I recommended leaving the tax rate where it is.
Uh-huh.
And the reason it came out the way it did is every year, it's generally set at a higher rate than that initially, knowing full well that the council has the prerogative to come in at a lower tax rate down to the effective rate.
Right.
And we won't know until next meeting what they decide to do. But this was just a level that they set it at to have the prerogative to go higher if during the discussions it was
Sure.
determined that they chose to do
Right.
so. I have had no indication they're going to do that.
Uh-huh. Well, I
Okay.
appreciate your answer. Thank you. Our mayors, the 3 mayors I worked with, presented their budgets in June. And we had the whole summer to work on them rather than waiting and waiting. And then it's crunch time, trying to find out what you need to tweak. So, going right up, as I understand, it's going up to almost the rollback. Is that correct?
It
But
was
not
actually
rollback.
set at the rollback rate, just as a place to have as a baseline.
And at rollback, that means we can vote, the citizens vote.
If it goes
on
over
it.
the rollback
Right.
rate, yes.
I think it's 8, is it 8%?
It's 8% over the effective rate.
Right.
Both are hypothetical rates, by the way.
Right, I realize that, I
Okay.
know that, but I thought it was at 8%, it goes to the voters, that's why it goes to 7.9.
At the rollback rate, yes, if it's set at that, it will. It can
Right.
be anywhere between the effective and the rollback
Right.
rate.
I understand that, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone have any comments for her? Okay, next up, Ron Green, again.
Ron Green, 14255 5 Antonio, haven't moved since I was up here last time, so. I do want to, it warms my heart to hear that you're not going to be spending our money in any fashion as a tax break or whatever on that line.
I don't know where that got started, but it was never an intention of mine or
Wonderful.
anyone else's
I-
part that I know.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. On the time I spent going through the budget, it would be informative if you could include in the 200-plus pages a breakdown of where all the monies come from as income from business. And that's not included. In the past, in past times, there used to be a breakdown of where all the monies come. For example, how much comes from Walmart, how much comes from different events, how much comes from the different places. Is that something that could be included at some point?
That is on the revenue portion of the budget. It
But it's lumped
shows
together?
it's sales tax revenue.
But could we spread it out to see the different sources?
Actually, the reports that we get, it's very difficult to even get the reports, and they are confidential. They're not public information to my knowledge. But I'll
Okay.
certainly check on that.
Okay, because at one point that was public information that we would have in the city of Pelotas some years back. So I don't know what's changed since then, but if you
It-
could look into it, I would appreciate
It
it.
could have been released that way, but it probably should not have been,
Possibly.
from my understanding of the rules from the comptroller.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay? Doug Young? Okay. So that concludes public hearing item number 3, and that'll be at 7:15. Call it 7:16, Grace, if you would. And this brings up public hearing item number 4, and this is to give all interested persons the right to appear and be heard on the adoption of a proposed tax year 2014 ad valorem property tax rate. We had no one sign up to speak at this, so we will open it and close it at 7:16. That brings us to the last public hearing, item number 5 on our agenda. This public hearing is, and we'll start this, call it 7:16. This is a public hearing to give all interested persons the right to appear and be heard on amendments to the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 98 zoning, Appendix A, Schedule of Uses, to remove all by right designated by X and City Council approval designated by CC annotations for the use flea market. And this was brought forward to us by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We have no one signed up to speak on this, so please show this closing at 7:17, Grace. That takes us to citizens to be heard. Gary, did you say you wanted to speak at citizen be heard? Please state your name and address.
Gary Gillespie, 10100 Rafter S Trail in Helotes. I want to speak on the hazardous waste that's happening in 2 weeks. And then I also want to ask, when I came 2 weeks ago, and this should probably go to the city administrator, when I looked out at the EDC budget, it was a new line item for $10,000 and another new line item for $30,000 or $40,000, and it hadn't been the year before. And that's what got me thinking about, what are we spending all that money for? There was nothing with it. And then I heard it's been pulled, no, it wasn't pulled, they discussed, it went back and forth, and so that's what I wanted to know about. I think when you do something over $50,000, if that's what it is, there should be some explanation, and it should be out in the community. I wanted to speak about the hazardous waste that's happening in 2 weeks. Is it going up on the signboard? Yes, no? Not sure. Last year it went up on the signboard. So every Tom, Dick, and Harry that went by saw that we had hazardous waste. My husband last year took all of our hazardous waste, not a lot, paint cans, various and sundry things like that, and waited in line well over 1 hour. I can't remember if he said it was an hour and a half or what. He said the man in front of him had a truck, and he had flatbed pulling, and it was filled with paint, and he could see all this allegedly hazardous waste items. And I said, when he came back, and I said, oh my gosh, I said, weren't they checking IDs? Weren't they checking to make sure they're Helotes citizens? And he goes, nope, didn't. Last time we had it, several years ago, we had an individual who wrote a very irate letter to the editor of the local newspaper and said that he came by once and the line was too long. Went out and had breakfast with his family. He said he came back an hour and a half or 2 hours later because you gave a window of the time that was being to be collected, and it was closed. And he didn't have, our citizen did not have a chance to get rid of his hazardous waste that year. So my question to you is, are we going to have IDs checked by a city employee? How are we going to make sure it's only Helotes citizens and not random people that see we're having this?
We welcome you to call City Hall. We will not get into a discussion on this item right now. It's
Well, you
not
can't
appropriate
answer my
during Citizens
question,
Be
yes or
Heard.
no.
Not going to answer your question, but
Okay,
we'll be glad
thank
to
you.
answer it during the day at City Hall. Okay, that takes care of our citizens to be heard. We appreciate your input, and I don't mean to be short, but that's just the rules of citizens to be heard. Okay, next up is our consent agenda. And the consent agenda tonight is made up of items 7 through 11. Consent agenda in this type of meeting is designed to speed the limit or speed the meeting along and make it a little more efficient. Council, if they have a question on a particular agenda item, are free to ask that question if it can be answered fairly briefly, and we will handle that. If they would like to have a further or more in-depth discussion on an item on the consent agenda, they can elect to have it pulled, and we'll move it down into the rest of the agenda. So tonight on items 7 through 11, are there any questions, or are there any items that a council member would like to have pulled?
I have a question. Sorry. I have a question. I think it's just a typo on item number 11 on page 9. I think it's just missing a cross out on 86-46. Should that 4 be crossed out? It's probably more for Grace.
Which page?
Where are you at?
Page 5 of
Yeah.
item number 11.
Right, but where in there are you talking about?
This section says 86-46. Should that 4 be crossed out?
It is unlawful any person.
Is it supposed to be?
Mayor, where there is a cross out, but it's right on where the 4 makes the cross. I noticed that when I was typing it, there is actually
There is one there?
Yeah.
number of reasons to change.
Okay, that's the only question I had. Thank you, Grace.
So that being the case, no questions, no request to pull an item, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve consent agenda item. You do?
I have another, this is on page 4 of 9 of the same.
Okay,
I mean, it should say 4, there's the word 4 is missing. Section 86.3, required obedience to traffic regulations. It is unlawful for any person.
Grace, you have that?
What was that?
86-3.
Oh, 4 instead of the any?
Grace, you okay with that? You have it? Okay. Anything else? Then we would have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items 7 through 11.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we approve consent agenda items 7 through 11 with
We
the
have a second?
changes.
We have a second? Second. So the motion is to approve items 7 through 11, consent agenda. And in that motion, we're including the 2 changes on item number 11 for the revisions to the ordinance. So then we'll go to the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. The consent agenda items 7 through 11 are approved as written. That takes us to item number 12.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we discuss and take action on item number 12 as written.
We have a motion from Massey. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion from Massey, a second from Bias. To discuss and take action on item number 12. So, Cindy, it's your motion.
I actually talked to Rick about this because I was a little confused about leaving the term flea market in there and taking out the annotations, so then there would be blank annotations all the way across. And he said, and you can speak for yourself, but from what I understand, he wanted to leave it on there because then people will know that it's not something we've omitted. We know that there's flea markets, but we've decided we don't really want them in Helotes. But that would be the only one in the entire land of uses that doesn't have anything written on it. So I was just wondering what you all thought about that.
Okay, and that can certainly be put into the motion to strike that out of the schedule of uses if that's what you choose.
Well, and I just want to make sure that
Sure.
that's something we do want to do or not, and, for the reasons that Rick told us, right?
I actually have a comment on that. In discussing this with the city attorney, he would actually recommend, because I mentioned to him some of the concerns that you had, he would actually recommend to go ahead and keep it in the schedule of uses, strike everything, but put CC under the industrial 1 zoning designation, rather than just leave everything blank. And there is only one property located within the city of Helotes that has industrial zoning, so that would essentially eliminate flea market from the city of Helotes.
We can go ahead and complete the discussion if you'd like, and then you can amend the motion if you want to include that suggestion by the city attorney.
Well, if the city attorney says that, I kind of, I agree that it would be, it just would look odd to not have anything on there. And I think that is a good alternative.
So you want to include that in your motion? motion?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
I would like to.
So the motion is changed to include approving this item,
Approving
showing
this
the
item.
city council approval required in the industrial district. Okay, Bert?
I don't have anything.
Paul? Comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I was at the planning and zoning meeting when this discussion came up through the multiple meetings that they had chance to discuss it. And I like the city attorney's suggestion. I also understand why we would have to leave it in there, because I know that our city staff and our city has a different practice on what happens when somebody comes up with a business that isn't listed in the zoning code. We have to deal with it differently, and it could very well slip in when it's not specifically addressed. So we have to leave it in there so that we can identify that it's not something we want. If you don't have it in there, then it becomes acted on differently, and we may have difficulty legally stopping something if it's not actually in the code. So I like the addition that we have there, although I guess we could be worried about that one piece of property.
Well, they would still have to come to council.
That's correct.
Cindy, anything else to follow up? Bert? Anything else, Alex? Okay, then we'll go to the vote. All in favor of the motion to approve removing the current designations from flea market on the schedule of uses and instead having city council approval, CC, designated in the industrial district slot. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries, and that item is approved. Takes us to item 13. This is discussion and action on the approval of 3 wall signs in Old Town, creative sign ordinance. We have a motion and a second to discuss and take action, please.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we discuss and take action on agenda item 13.
We have a motion from Buys. Do we have a second? Second from Frederick. So we have a motion and a second to discuss and take action on item 13. Bert, it's your motion, so you're up first.
Well, first of all, I agree with the P&Z's recommendation not to accept the application, but I had a question on the application. It says that the number of businesses there is 2. Is that correct, or is that just something
They're including the new bakery that's in that one building. That's one building just separated into 2 different sections.
Well, it's not considered a separate business? I mean, it's not considered just one business on the application, though?
Yes, it's only one business that's applying, but the number of businesses that are located in that one building would be 2.
Okay. That's where I got confused. Thank you.
Anything else? Paul?
I certainly agree with the Planning and Zoning Commission, although I don't like, we certainly want to stimulate some business down in there, but I would just encourage the business owner to work with city staff to get it more in line with the rules that we've set down there. That's all I have.
Okay, Alex?
No, Mr. Mayor, I completely concur, and I'm just curious with the way the motion was made, whether an affirmative vote approves the signs, so we would have to have a negative vote to disapprove the signs and agree with the planning and zoning? Is that the way that
That's
would
the way
work?
the creative
Okay.
sign ordinance works. It's yes or no.
No, but I mean, so
On
when you
request.
call for the vote,
Yes,
would have to vote it.
A yes vote would be to approve
Approve
the
the
3
signs.
signs as
Okay.
submitted. A no vote would be to deny it, which would mean they'd come back and
okay,
try and work something out with staff. Anything else?
that's all.
Cindy?
No, I agree with what Mr. Frederick said.
Okay.
May I comment?
Sure.
Before y'all take action. Now, remember, during a creative sign review, the commission, or excuse me, the council can modify in whatever manner you would like their submission. So, to Councilman Frederick's concern about stimulating business in Old Town, if you wanted to allow just one of the 3 signs that are presented, you could do that as a part of your motion.
This creative sign ordinance is very confusing.
creative sign essentially, again, as the mayor and I discussed, there are no rules in a creative sign application.
Right.
You either like it or you don't like it, or you want to modify it and you base your motion on that modification. There are no variances here. It's either an up or down vote on whatever the motion is on the floor.
Okay. My understanding was take it or not,
But you can modify their request through a motion
but
if
you
you,
wouldn't be able to redesign the sign. You would have to accept one of these three signs or none, right?
you could in your motion, you could redesign the sign essentially. Now, whether the applicant is actually going to abide by that, he may submit a new request. I'm just saying that typically when it comes to sizes or number of signs or something, you do have latitude in the creative sign review to approve something partially or not approve it at all or approve it as presented.
Mr. Mayor,
So let's, yeah.
if I may, Rick, if I'm not mistaken from what you explained to planning and zoning, this item is only coming to council because the individual requested 3 signs on the storefront versus the one that's already allowed by the ordinance. If he or she wants only 1 sign, it doesn't come to council at all, and P&Z just basically says it's not a problem, it's pretty much a rubber stamp in most cases. But we don't have an exception process for the sign ordinance except going through the creative sign process. And so it sounds like we're debating whether the sign is creative or not, when in fact that's the only way to let somebody get more than 1 sign on the storefront. And their decision was decisively, no, they don't need 3 signs when every other business there only gets 1 sign on the storefront. So it's not a matter of creativity, and if we decline this and say, no, that this application as presented is not approved, they can come back for 1 sign and never have to come back here at all. It's just automatic.
That is correct. That is correct. And in no way am I insinuating that these are creative signs. They are not creative signs. The problem in Old Town, or they're not, in my opinion, creative signs. The problem in Old Town is you cannot have essentially there is no variance process but for creative sign review. So,
And also, just as a note, the 1 sign in the creative sign ordinance is limited to 32 square feet maximum size, and these 3 signs total 44 square feet. So not only would they have more than 1 sign, they would have more square footage.
But if they only went with the 1 sign, then it would not be above 32 square feet, it would not be above 1 sign, and it would be an automatic approval without even having to go anywhere.
Correct.
So we don't need to really do anything to approve modifying the application. If we say no, and they come back to the city staff and say, can I have 1 sign that's 28 square feet? Sure.
This should not have come to us. This is not a creative sign dilemma. This shouldn't come to us.
Bert, you have anything else? Paul?
I said we just vote on the motion.
Cindy, any other comments?
No, just that. I don't understand why this even came to us. It should not have. It's not a creative sign problem. It's a matter of a number of sign problem.
I agree, but again, there is no variance process in Old Town but for the creative sign review.
Well, and there's a reason for that.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. I'm just telling you, that is why it's coming to council.
Which is part of what needs to be done when an application comes in. We have to follow it through and do something with it, so this is what we decided to do. Okay, anything else? Then we'll go to the question. And again, a yes vote would be to approve the application as submitted, a no vote would be to deny it. So that being said, all in favor say aye. Opposed say no.
No.
Okay, the motion is denied. Okay, next up on the agenda is a discussion on the proposed budget for fiscal year ending 2015. And Rick has some updated numbers, and we're going to talk about the option 1 and option 2 for the lump sum payment to the employees and go over some other basic information. And then we'll open it up for questions and discussion.
Okay, good evening. I did want to go through your budget notebook quickly to tell you what has changed from the prior submittal to council 2 weeks ago. First thing I'm going to direct you to, please, is tab number 6. Tab number 6 includes the updated salary chart. Included within the updated, essentially there are no additions to the update to the salary chart that is presented to y'all, with the addition of reserve officers within the police department. Generally speaking, the reserve officers that were there that were not allocated any salary numbers in this proposed budget, they have been allocated a certain dollar figure in the salary component so that they can work 5 shifts per week. So that amongst the 5 of them, they can work 5 shifts a week each week of the year. The reason for that, and I will defer to the mayor after I go through this, is the justification for the reserve officers. But essentially, it's for increased patrol and traffic enforcement throughout the city. That salary figure is calculated at approximately $16 an hour, and again includes 5 shifts of 8 hours each. So essentially what we have added in here through the reserve officers, turning them part-time, is creating one additional position, full-time position, minus the benefits within the police department. Switching to tab number 7. Tab number 7 is the general fund, and so I'm going to go through each of the income and expenditure numbers quickly to tell you how they have changed from the last submittal. Under ad valorem or property tax revenue, we had a reduction in $960. Non-property tax revenue, which is essentially sales tax, a decrease of approximately $1,500. Franchise tax revenue increased $1,484, and other contract revenue remained stable or neutral. Permit, license, and fee revenue increased by $40,000, or approximately $40,000, and that is related to increased collections and building permits. License and fee revenue decreased $15,270, or excuse me, license and fee was the building permits. Court fine and fee revenue decreased $15,270. That is related primarily to a reduction in court fine revenue or traffic citations. Miscellaneous income revenue decreased by $2,278, and dispatch and EMS revenue increased by $2,120. All told, last budget submittal to this one, revenues have increased by $23,517. Switching over to expenditures. City Council expenditures have decreased $115. Administrative expenditures have decreased $4,800. City Secretary expenditures have decreased $547. And municipal court expenditures have decreased $1,500. Human Resources has increased by $632. Development Services decreased by $609. And Animal Control, Public Works, Code Enforcement decreased by $55. Buildings and Grounds expenditures increased by $2,895. Again, those are related to increased utility payments. Police Department expenditures increased by $28,600. That is primarily related to the reserve officer transforming into a part-time officer position. Fire Department increased by $631. EMS expenditures have decreased by $1,906, and dispatch expenditures increased by $298. Total expenditures are expected to have increased from last submittal by $23,516. Overall, looking at the general fund, we are projecting, the general fund ending fund balance will increase by $22,791, and the year-end estimate general fund balance increased by $22,792. You can see here that we're projecting year-end revenues over expenditures to have a surplus at the end of this fiscal year of $132,000. Currently, we sit at $297,000, and we budgeted to be ahead by $50,000. Switching to,
Again, Rick, if you would, just so everyone will understand where the numbers are coming from, explain how you have taken the first 11 months, then annualized these numbers so they can still and will change between now and the 25th of September when the budget is due to be approved.
yes. Now, some of the numbers are not annualized, some are specific. The other numbers are annualized at 11 and a half months because we are 11 and a half months essentially through the year. Other numbers are annualized at three quarters out of the 4 quarters because we have yet to receive fourth quarter payments on certain things. That's primarily related to franchise income that comes in. One of the things that you'll see is that we have not received SAWS water franchise fees yet, and we typically get that at the end of the year. So we have budgeted in there to receive the full budgeted amount, but we have not received that yet. Switching to tab 8. Tab 8 is the interest and sinking fund. The interest and sinking fund income has decreased from last time decreased $15,220. Expenditures have remained neutral, and the ending fund balance is drawn down to 0 out of the interest and sinking fund, just as it was during the prior submittal. Tab number 9. Tab number 9 is the capital replacement fund. Minimal changes here. Income is expected to decrease by $206. Expenditures are decreased by $411, and again, it draws that account down to 0. The majority of money in the capital replacement fund are capital funds that are dedicated to the EDC. As we go through the water and sewer line engineering, we will continue to draw that down to 0 through next fiscal year. Tab 10. Tab 10 is municipal court security and municipal court technology. On both municipal court security and technology, income remains stable. Expenditures under municipal court security have increased by $4,947. And again, those are related to revenues that we have received once municipal court processes its payments to the state. Municipal court technology expenditures are flat, and ending fund balances on both of those for next fiscal year are 0. I want to make it clear that for budget purposes, we're drawing all of these funds down to 0, these restricted funds. In no way will we actually spend all of those monies and draw them down to 0 in each one of those accounts. Now, the reason that we do that is because we want to have the latitude to utilize those restricted funds as much as possible. Why? Because in the fund policy, we say that we will utilize restricted funds first because we have to use them for specific purposes rather than use general fund money that can be used for any purpose in the budgets. Item number 11. Item number 11 is the PEG balance. Income has remained, expected income remains stable at $15,058. Expenditures were increased over the last submittal by $374. Tab number 12. Tab number 12 deals with police training and education. There were no changes other than a $1 increase in expenditures to that fund budget. And tab number 13. Tab number 13 is on school safety. It also includes household hazardous waste, police department explorer post, police department forfeiture for both federal and state seizure monies, and that is it under tab number 13. The most significant decrease or change from the last time is under the school safety budget. School safety expenditures are expected to decrease from the last submittal that we gave you by $11,897. That is related to recent expenditures that the fire department is planning on making for National Fire Week, essentially at the beginning of October. That expenditure will come to you September 25th for your approval. So we have dropped that expenditure down in anticipation of your approval September 25th. Household hazardous waste, both income and expenditures increased by $94. Revenues increased by $94, We are not planning any expenditures for next fiscal year because it takes 2 years to generate sufficient revenue in order to have a household hazardous waste program or collection event. Police Department Explorer Post, all of that remained the same. Police Department forfeiture for both state and federal monies remain the same as well. Those are the changes. Those are the general changes within the budget from 2 weeks ago to today. Did you want to address the reserve to part-time officer now, or do you want me to go over the salary stuff first?
We can go over the salary.
Okay. The mayor asked that I prepare a presentation for council on the options that we have included within the budget or the proposed budget for personnel salaries. If you recall, we presented two options. One essentially was a percentage of a step increase, and one was a step increase or an equivalent to a step increase. Both of them were lump sum. So I wanted to go through that and answer any questions that you had, because I heard that there may be some questions or some misunderstandings on it. So, and I've tried to make this as simple as I possibly can. So, here we go. Here's one employee. Meet Tom. Tom's annual salary currently is $52,571, okay? But his estimated market value, which is that value that when we do our salary surveys every 2 years, we figure out in the marketplace what is the average salary for that position. His estimated market value is $48,917. Now, this is bold for a reason, and I want y'all to keep this in mind. The average estimated market value across all full-time employees in the city of Helotes is $48,917. So I'm using this throughout all of these case studies, if you will. Option number one is because Tom's current annual salary is greater than his estimated market value, his lump sum payment that he would receive would be $500 for FYE 2015. Okay? What we are planning on doing with that option, if council approves that option, is to pay that with longevity in December. Why December? Because those are the holidays when people tend to need more disposable income in order to provide for their families for the holidays. And so if this is one option, the proposal is to pay it with longevity in December on top of their weekly salary. So that's Tom. Now, the next one is Susan. So meet Susan. Her annual salary is $44,236.71. Okay? But her estimated market value is $48,917. So it's the same estimated market value as Tom. Both of these are highlighted here because $48,917 is again the average estimated market value across all municipal employees. $44,236.71 is the average salary across all full-time employees in the city of Helotes. Okay, so this is the average employee for the city of Helotes. Because Susan's current annual salary is less than her estimated market value, she, under option 1A, which is the two options essentially, or option 1A, would be to receive a lump sum payment of $628 in fiscal year 2015. That is equivalent, and I think this is important to see, that's actually equivalent to a 1.42% raise year over year, comparing her lump sum and dividing it by her prior year salary. Her average proposed lump sum payment, the average proposed lump sum payment to full-time employees here would also equal 1.41% across all full-time employees. So if you chose option 1, you could say that the average COLA or lump sum payment that you gave to employees was 1.41. Now, people who make more money, it's going to be less. People who make less money than that, it's going to be more. But the average across all full-time employees would be 1.41%. Now, one of the things that the mayor is very interested in is what is the percentage of salaries, or what is the percentage that you get when you divide the total dollar amount of salaries or personnel costs versus the total expenditures. because you want to make sure that you don't have 99% of your expenditures be related to personnel costs, because you can't maintain a city with that, because you need maintenance and operating money or supplies, you need to pay your utility bills, etc. Under this scenario, the total salaries as a percentage of total expenditures would equal 68.03%, which is a comfortable percentage for us because it essentially is the median across all suburban cities in Bexar County. Some are higher, 75%, some are lower, much smaller cities at 31%, but most of them fall within the 60% range. Okay, so under this option 1, I want to explain the formula that we're using and tell you why certain parts of that formula are important. This is the formula that I think people are getting confused on. Essentially, what we're trying to do is relate it back to the step and grade system, which is the one step. That's the $1,348 is the amount of each step. So if you move from step 8 to step 9, it's $1,348 additional into your base salary. But what you have to do here is you have to divide, what we're doing here is dividing the current salary by the estimated market value and then multiplying that by $1,348. Now, if you just did that, you would be rewarding people who are closer to their estimated market value than people who are further away from their estimated market value, which is, I think, antithetical to what we're trying to do under the step and grade system. So what you have to do there is you have to subtract all of this from 1. Well, actually, you have to subtract this portion from 1 in order to make people who are further away from their estimated market value get more than people who are closer to their estimated market value. Okay? Again, we're trying to relate this back to the step adjustment, or to the step and grade chart. Now, we're also trying to make sure that the base that anybody gets is $500. So after you do this little formula here, you have to add it to the 500, thereby making people who are further away from their estimated market value receive more under this option 1 than people who are closer to their estimated market value. The theory there is that we should be paying them more than people who are closer to their estimated market value in order to catch them up to their estimated market value. Does that make sense? Clear as mud? Okay. And so that's what we put here. There's a larger employee investment for employees below their estimated market value under option 1. Now, meet, I believe her name is Karen. So Karen has the same estimated market value. She has the same annual salary as Susan. The different scenario here is option 2. Remember, in the budget, we included option 1 and option 2. Option 2, this would be citywide. Karen would receive a lump sum payment of $1,348 in FY 2015, which is equivalent to a one-step adjustment or a 3.05% raise year over year. The average percentage raise across all employees, if you do the $1,348 or the one step or the step equivalent, it's all the same, would be 3.22% raise year over year. Now, I think that we have to put the step and grade system into perspective, into these perspectives here. First off, the step and grade compensation system was initiated in FYE 2012, okay? Which means that we are 3 years into that system. We will be going into our 4th year of that system come October 1. If you recall, within that system, there was a 5-year goal, not a requirement, but a goal to get everybody as close, well, first off, number 1, get everybody within their salary range, because we had people before the step and grade system that were not within their salary range. So we have gotten everybody but 2 employees within their salary range. And we will, that same scenario will remain should you approve either option 1 or option 2. Okay? Additionally, we offered, I think we need to remind ourselves that we offered full steps in FYE 2013 and FYE 2014, which were done during recessionary years, which many other cities out there were not providing any step adjustments or cost of living adjustments during that time period, or they were significantly less than what they're offering today. And each time that council gave the step adjustment in 13 and 14, the average across all city employees was a 3%, 3+% increase year over year. It was either a 2.9 or it went up. Now, some in the police department and the fire department and some in administration received well in excess of 7 to 10 to, I think it was higher than 10% for some employees. So I'm just using this to keep everybody under the same perspective here. Now, also we have to remind ourselves that in FYE 2014, which is this current fiscal year, we updated the step and grade chart. We updated the step and grade chart, and each step, after we looked at market variations and we looked at cost of living, increased by 14.04%. It increased from $1,182 per step to $1,348 per step, okay, which is a 14% increase in that step allotment. And we also expanded certification pay across all municipal departments that had within their departments certification pay potential. So animal control, public works, city secretary, in this budget year I likely will be including during the next one items for payroll. Any department that had the capability of having certification, we tried to add certification pay in there. So all of these things, I just put it, look, I'm an employee. I want you to choose option 2. But what I'm telling you is either option, that option number 1 in the grand scheme of things is not detrimental to, in my opinion, employee welfare, and they have been treated well over the last 4 to 5 years under this system. I've been treated well under the system that we're on. So I'm just giving you some food for thought in how you approach this. Now, what are our justifications in including option 1 and option 1A in here? Number 1, we're trying to not have a long-term financial commitment during a period in the city's history where we're looking at many other things here. Number 2, you have an unstable benefit market. You already know that the Affordable Care Act has had a detrimental effect on employee costs on their dependent coverage. Now, we're fortunate that a lot of people here at the city don't have dependent coverage, but nonetheless, the Affordable Care Act has had implications on health coverage here. We initially saw, in addition, our claims history under the health coverage went up 53%. We were able to get that down to actually below the cost that we were looking at the prior fiscal year. But it's an unstable benefit market, and many insurance companies don't know exactly what's still going to happen when it comes to the Affordable Care Act. We also, since FYE 2010, have offered a full benefits package to employees. Prior to 2010, if you recall, we did not offer vision or FYE 2010, we did not offer vision and dental. We added those in. So now the city can say that it does offer a full benefit package and pays the full cost of that benefit package to all full-time employees. Dependent coverage, again, is another thing, but we do offer it to the employees themselves. We're also seeing increased liabilities within the employee pension fund, and we're having to pay for that. And rightly so, because the state government, the state of Texas, and also TMRS is now forcing cities to catch up on their unfunded liabilities, which is a good thing, but also takes more money out of our M&O budget than that we could have used for, let's say, salary increases. The other consideration that we have here is the potential issuance of debt. We are going to have next meeting a discussion, as we've had on multiple things here already, about issuing certificate of obligations for a variety of capital projects. That debt service is probably around $400,000 for the city of Helotes itself. That doesn't include the EDC portion, okay? And so I have this in the back of my mind when we're talking about salaries that, wait, we have this huge burden coming up. It's a good burden because all of those projects are worthwhile, but is this the time to be committed to an automatic increase in salaries? Versus, and that's one of the justifications for, or the main justification for us looking at the lump sum versus the permanent salary increase. Also, we're looking at development, legal issues that we all know about, okay? And we have that over our heads that whether we will or will not win our case, we still may be liable for some monies out there that we don't yet know what we may be liable for when it comes to development within our ETJ. So that's one issue that we're looking at as well. And lastly, I just lumped in here, and I've already talked about this, why we're looking at lump sums. We're looking at that we would plan for the lump sum during the holiday period, December, as an added benefit to employees. So are there any questions on that presentation, comments?
Yeah, Rick, just so everybody's clear, option 1A is actually option 1.
Yes, option 1 and option 1A are the same thing.
1A, if option 1 is chosen, is merely the example of an employee whose actual salary is less than the estimated market value. And that just gives us a way to balance that. So when you pick if you pick option 1, you would also be picking option 1A. And then, of course, option 2 is the equivalent to a one-step increase for all employees. And then, of course, there are other options that are available, such as giving a one-step or nothing. So, it's not the only two choices, but these are the two that we chose with our recommendation to go with option 1. So as far as questions, Cindy, we'll start off with you on this particular part or any part of the budget.
Okay, I don't have any questions on this particular issue. I've been thinking and mulling it over my head, and I kind of know what I would like to do. But I do have a question. I was going to bring this up the last time, and I forgot about the hazardous waste fee that we added on, or that you suggested that we add on. And again, the thing that bothers me is and actually Gary Gillespie brought this up, the fact that we're going to have to really work on this. If we're going to be charging the citizens of Helotes now for this fee, they better have access to this hazardous waste. They can't show up, after the half a day that we do it, and nobody's there to pick up their hazardous waste. So I hope that's something that is being looked into.
If you can, go ahead and explain that we're following the requirements of the grant that we're getting, and that's why it's operated the way it is. With our own, we can set the rules. We can set the hours. We can set who can come and go. Under the rules of this grant that we have, we're very limited on the restrictions that we can place on who can come drop off hazardous materials. It's just the way the grant works. So please go into a little detail on that so the council and others will understand.
That was through, if you recall, the prior one that we had 2 years ago and the subsequent, the one in September and also the one in 2015, those were funded through ACOG. We could not limit that to City of Helotes residents only. It had to be area, the most we could get away with was saying area residents, because these are federal dollars and they wanted, it's just a part of the grant. Now what we do is we try to target market Helotes residents. So what we did in the prior years is we sent postcards out to all Helotes residents. We did banners on the streets. We did ads in the Echo. We try to get it out to Helotes residents as much as possible. This year we have it on our own public access channel. We have it in banners. We have it on our own city website. So we are trying to get the word out to Helotes residents, but the sheer fact that we have to put a banner on Bandera Road means that everybody is going to hear about it. And everybody loves a household hazardous waste program because nobody knows what to do with their paint cans. And this is the only place. So that is the issue with that grant program.
So that'll go on again this year, the same situation that's gone on in the past.
That is
This year and next year,
And
it's
next
grants.
year.
That is correct.
And it's only for half a day that this is going on?
The reason that we limit it for half a day is because we're only awarded $25,000. Last time, we went up to our $25,000 figure, and because we still had residents that were down to Iron Horse Way, essentially, on 1560, we opted to extend that, knowing full well that we would have to use city dollars to fund that rather than grant dollars to fund that. So we let it go on as long as we were comfortable. We let it go on as long as we could until we no longer felt comfortable that we could pay those bills. And at that point, I think it was still before noon, and we had to shut the household hazardous waste. Otherwise, I would have been coming to council and having to explain why I was $20,000 in the hole on one line item. So that's the full story behind that event, and that will likely happen again this event. Now, that we learned a few things the first time we did it. The biggest one is the number of people and how to handle efficiently those number of people through the process, because there's a 4 or 5 step process that they have to go through. There's tires, there's chemicals, there's paint, there's oil, there's all these different stations. Okay, so we've gotten better at that. The other thing is, we did not anticipate the amount of people that would be showing up to this event, and we did not anticipate the amount of stuff people would be bringing to it. So this year we have limited it to 100 pounds per person, period, which should increase it. 100 pounds is still a lot of material, but it should increase the efficiency or the speed at which people can go through the system, because Ms. Gillespie was correct. We had several people, and by the way, those people were all Helotes residents, but we had several people that came through that had trailers full of material.
Wow.
And it takes a lot of time for Clean Harbors or the new company we're using, PSC, to process a trailer full of hazardous waste, essentially. So the point that she brought up, well taken. I mean, it's nothing that we didn't already know, but I'm glad she brought it up, because we're going to address it the best we can the next 2 years. Now, on the household hazardous waste fee that we're proposing, remember, we are proposing that only because this is such a well-attended and I think an important event for Helotes residents. We are proposing it because ACOG unofficially has said, we are not going to be your every year grant giver. Essentially, we're not going to give you $25,000 a year without you creating a program to sustain it yourselves. So we are proposing that fee so that it only goes to household hazardous waste collection, and it'll take 2 years. So it's proposed to be a biennial event. But the thing that you're concerned with about Helotes residents, we then can limit who can use that event. And it would be limited, unless council desires otherwise, only to Helotes residents, and we would then check IDs.
I would also think, I mean, I'm not sure how this it'd have to be extended, the period of time that they could come. I mean,
It's all dependent on how much money we're able to generate through that fee and how long that goes. I mean, I'll be honest with you, 35 grand, which is what we're proposing, that'll maybe go to 1 or 2 o'clock, maybe.
okay, well then, just be prepared for the citizens who don't make it at that time to be complaining, because they're gonna be paying. Remember, the thing is, they're gonna be paying a fee and expecting something in return, and if they're not gonna get anything in return, there's gonna be a lot of complaints. So it's gonna have to be something we're gonna have to think about how to do it in a way that's fair to our citizens.
Sure.
Well, I know last time, and like Rick said, we learned a lot, and we are restricted, but when we were getting close to the maximum amount that we had received on the grant, the decision was made, as Rick said, to look at the line of cars, get an estimate of what we were looking at per car. We tried to get everyone that was in line at that time. We had a cutoff point, as I recall. We had an officer there, and we let all of those people come through, and it did cost us extra money, but we felt it was worth it. It was the people that came much later than that wound up not being able to get through because we'd reached over our limit.
Well, I think that it's imperative that the citizens know right now that this year and next year, that this service is a free service that's given to them. And so complaints are, it's free.
Yeah.
And they need to get there early,
And in all the advertising, we did say this year to noon. So we're going from noon, or from 9 to noon, and it's been advertised that way. And in that 3 hours, we'll blow through 25 grand like that. It's in a very expensive collection event.
Yeah.
And again, this proposal for the surcharge, if you will, on C6 is really just that, a proposal. So it's up to you guys to approve or deny that part of the budget and decide, do we want to continue having in hazardous waste collections past 2015 or not? But it will take, even with that surcharge, at least 2 years to get enough money to make it possible to do a pickup. Anything else, Cindy?
Are there any other places in San Antonio or in the area that does hazardous waste pickup, or that people can take their hazardous waste to without us having to?
I believe Bear
do
County
this?
does, where there used to be an 800 number that people could call, but that's no longer in existence. Rick, are you aware of anything?
It's still in existence, but their funding is intermittent. So I don't know if this year,
It's
do
very
you know if the
difficult.
funding came back?
No, I don't know, but I know it is there because I used it. I live within the county to the outside of San Antonio. And called them and sent me a bag. And
Right.
it was able to get like 6 cans of
Yep.
It's like a big garbage bag, very thick. We've done that before.
Yeah, and so they're funding, the problem with the Bear County program is they're contingent on grant funds as well. So I know that for several years, I'm glad to know that they have it back, but for several years, residents would call, and then they would call Bear County, and Bear County would say, we don't have grant funds available for it, so.
Mayor, just one more thing, they did ask, have you used this before? And they didn't bring up on it. And I guess they don't want to replace it.
And I know San Antonio does them occasionally, but they check utility bills
Yep.
or driver's licenses, and like a Helotes citizen would not be able to use that. And we would be able to control that if we're doing our own and paying for our own, but we can't when we're using the federal grant funds. Anything else?
No, I don't know. I just think that this is this is a service that the citizen will be paid for, and I have a feeling it's gonna come back and bite us. And I don't think it's, I just not sure that we need to be doing it, but that's just what I'm thinking.
Okay, Alex?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I had one question. When is the next time that we're going to be reevaluating the EMV on the salaries?
Next fiscal year.
So that'll be a year from now then?
Yes.
Okay. And so both options 1 and 2 don't take anybody closer to the EMV than they were a year ago? Because all salaries would basically be frozen. We'd give them a lump sum,
That's correct.
but essentially the base pay would be identical.
That is correct.
And so in some ways, we would actually put more distance between the EMV and the salaries of the employees by either of these two options.
If
And I
you-
understand the reasons, you sold them very well, and I agree with that. I understand that there are a lot of long-term consequences with base pay rate increases. But it does also not allow us to get closer to the EMV for any of the employees in the city. In fact, they could get further.
They could get further, but conversely, they also could get closer. It depends on what the market salary, or the salary surveys in a year tell us with regard to what the market cost or what the market value is for each one of those employees. So we do have some that go up and some that go down. So it just depends. Now, they may all go up. I don't know. We're
But
a
on
year out.
average, between the first and the second time we did it, they went up 14%, according to the presentation.
No. The
The
step in,
EMVs went up.
you can relate the 14% increase to the cost, if you will, of each employee's estimated market value. So yes, you can assume that the estimated market values went up to, which is the reason between the 1182 and the 1348. Yes, that is correct.
That's all I'm thinking.
I know we had discussed adding a full-time police officer, and now we're adding reserve officers to equal a full-time unit, so is that 2?
Within the budget, you originally had 1 additional police officer and 1 additional public works employee. And the mayor, speaking with the police chief, desired to propose that we take 5 reserve officers and turn them into part-time employees for additional patrol and traffic enforcement. But other than that, I'll defer to you on that.
Yeah, actually, that's partially correct, but we're still, when we started the Reserve Officer Corps, for lack of a better term, at the chief's request back in, I believe it was 2011, it was to bring people in that we could have help us and we could train, but it wouldn't cost us any money, either in salaries or uniform allowance. In this year's budget request or budget proposal by the PD, he talked about part-time officers, and in looking at it initially, it was fairly well discounted. However, the chief came back and talked to me about it at some length, and I better understood what he was trying to do. And the problem that the police department is having is with the Reserve Officer Corps. Currently, we have 5 reserve officers, and without any compensation at all, it's difficult to keep them, because after they're fully trained, they begin looking elsewhere. And so the proposal here is to still bring officers into the police department as reserves, non-paid, no uniform allowance. However, once that officer completes their field training, and that can go anywhere from 3 to 6 months to a year, depending on how much time they spend on patrol and learning how we do our business as a police department. Once they're fully trained and are out on patrols on their own, then by this new method, they would move from a reserve officer to a part-time officer status. The request was for $17 an hour. However, in looking at the range on patrol officers, we reached a decision to make it a little less than that and bring it in close to the bottom of the range, since it is a part-time unit. So it's going to be a little under $16 an hour rather than $17 an hour. And keep in mind, it's a pool. The chief would like to have 5 different shifts available each week, not necessarily using all 5, but have them available, to where once a reserve officer becomes part-time by completing their field training, when they go out on patrol, they would be paid on that part-time basis, to allow them to have a little money available for gas to get out here and other things. We would also pay them the part-time uniform allowance, which on your sheet you'll see, I believe it's $360. Keep in mind, we can have more reserve officers and more part-time officers. It doesn't matter whether we have 5 or 10. There will only be the 5 shifts, which pretty well puts a cap on it at around $39,000 by the time we figure the hourly rate per shift, the workman's comp, the unemployment, and the $360 for uniform allowance. It comes out to about $39,058. And so that pool will be there where he can select which officers. Right now, we have 5. But that's how that would be working. And the idea is, we're already looking at when we move McGuire, which is the plan, up to traffic and drug interdiction, that if one of the reserve officers tests out and qualifies to become a full-time officer, that is our pool for full-time officers, because we've trained them, we know how they work, we know who they are. If none of them apply, or none of them qualify for a full-time position, then we would have to advertise outside. But that was the thought process, and that's why we added it under the police department and showed that as part-time. Even though the amount is shown there is what they'll be paid, if you look at the part-time line item under police department, you'll see we've increased that to cover this cost. So that's just a pool that'll be used. Does that make sense? And that's why we decided to propose it, and I told the chief there were no guarantees. When I talked to Rick about it, we looked at the revenue side. We decided that if we can find the revenue, or the revenue looks like it's gonna be there, this would be a worthwhile place to assign $39,000 out of the budget. questions on that? Okay, so you've asked your questions? Did you get a chance?
Yep.
You're done, Bert?
Okay, I have a question about if we should go with option number 2. We have $13,000 that would be removed from street and drainage maintenance. Would that cripple any of our projects that we have scheduled for next year?
No, when we had discussed this initially, we said that's why we selected those, is we had very conservatively added some dollars in there. It may limit us on some of our crack fill and some of the other things on street, but we feel like we're in pretty good shape, and if we wanted to take money, that would be one place to look for it.
Okay, and then on the defibrillator that the fire chief is asking for, we still have 3 LifePak 12s as service. Is that correct? I think that's what I read in the budget.
Yes.
They're all working defibrillators and monitors.
Yes.
They're all up to snuff. Okay, that's all I had.
Okay, one other thing I'd like to touch on, just as a reminder, Rick had mentioned it briefly, the ratio of salaries and benefits to our overall budget. And from everything that I've studied, there's a concern when that ratio goes over 70%, which we were just over that last year and I believe the year before. So by proposing this option 1, even with the option 1, it's bringing us in with this addition to the part-time police officers to about 68%, just a hair over 68. We surveyed 14 other suburban cities in Bexar County and surrounding counties, and Rick was correct. It ranged from a low of 31% of the budget to a high of just over 75%. We're at 68.3 with this latest proposal. 8 of the cities are below us on the ratio. The next below us is 66.72%. 5 are higher than we are, and all 5 are over 70%, ranging from right at 72% to just over 75%. But the concern we have long-term is if we get too high with salaries and benefits, in looking at the revenue projected that's coming in, then we have to begin worrying about our debt service and running the rest of the city. And so that was the reason for this proposal over just a blanket one-step increase. Any questions about that?
Not about that, I have another
Okay.
comment to make.
Go ahead.
I keep trying to find, I'm going back to the hazardous waste thing, it really is bothering me. That's part of the income, the revenues we would get from this fee. What was the fee again? I can't find it in other.
It's $1.50 a quarter to residences, and we've added some equivalent to commercial users and construction containers that have a number of pulls a year.
So
The total would be just over $16,000 annually, using the same numbers that C6 provided to us this year.
Oh. How, why could, okay, so you added 16,000 to the income from that fee?
That's in the special hazardous waste budget.
Okay.
It's separate from the general fund budget.
Okay.
That's another sheet. that
So
you-
my question is this, since not everybody is gonna be using this, why not just have, why do we have to put this in the budget? Why do we have to do this kind of fee with C6? Why couldn't we just charge people to come when they came to drop something off, just charge them at that point? Then the people who actually use the service will be paying for the service rather than putting the burden on all of the citizens of Helotes. Why wouldn't that work?
That would certainly be one way to do it. The problem that I see offhand would be credit card usage, whether you require cash or whether you would take checks. You know, what form of payment would you be able to accept or we'd be able to accept? And that would be also another delay that I would see as people are in line, having to go ahead and do some kind of transaction for payment. So this is typically just a way to achieve the goal of having the funds available to do that. And everybody, granted, would have to pay for that, but it's much like fire and police and everything else. We're assessing them taxes each year, which the state requires us to do because we don't get any funding from the state, nor does any other city. But not every citizen uses every service we have, yet they're paying for it through taxes. So that's just one way to look at it off the top of my head. But again, this is a proposal. It does not have to be approved with the budget. It can be looked at a later date or not at all. So it's up to you to, as council, to approve this as part of the budget, pull it out of the budget, and look at it another time. It's your prerogative as council.
Well, I would like to see it pulled from the budget.
Okay? Anything else? Alex, anything else
No, thank you.
at this time? Paul?
No, sir.
Okay. Bert?
Not right now.
Rick, anything to add? Okay. Well, just, any suggestions, any questions, please, bring them to us between now and the 25th, because the 25th, we will need to, have your approval so that we can get everything to, Bear County. That includes the final decision on the ad valorem tax rate, proposals such as this. Be prepared to take action on some things independent of the whole budget. That's what you're here for. As I said when I presented the budget to the council, this is by far the most important function of the city council of any city during the year, because the budget helps us determine what we're going to be able to do in the way of services through each year. Keeping in mind that in our form of government, the state of Texas provides no kind of funding for cities, so they allow us to obtain our revenues. We don't earn our revenues, we obtain them through taxation and fees, and that's just the way it's done in Texas. And so it's very important for us to have long-term vision, take as much emotion out of these decisions as we can, and look at what overall is best for the city. So just reminding council of the things that they'll need to do next week or the next meeting, and hopefully you guys will give it a lot of thought, and we look for a good meeting and a productive meeting next time. So one more time, any other questions or comments? Okay, well, that's the last item on the agenda, so we're going to adjourn at 8:28.